customs plane on patrol saw this go-fast boat meet with a second boat near Stiltsville. As agents moved in, the first boat took off.
You still have coke back to here, and it's stacked all the way from top to bottom.
They were catching a little square grouper off of Key Biscayne today. Bales and bales of it.
We want to get the most bust. We want to have more bust than anybody else.
The Federal Drug Task Force has an impressive record of stopping marijuana smugglers at sea. 2.9 million pounds has been seized since the task force was formed last year.
The person who actually owned the container and was getting legitimate merchandise had no idea that his container was being used to smuggle all this cocaine.
Some of them smeared with Jamaican mustard.
Obviously, someone thought that by smearing some of the packages with mustard, it would detract the dogs from detecting the marijuana.
You have these people riding around with hundreds and hundreds of pounds of cocaine, sometimes thousands. They have to defend their part. They have to get it in without getting caught. Okay? Otherwise, they lose a substantial amount of money. They're going to be going lights out in total darkness, and if you're fishing out there in the middle of the night, they'll run you and your family over.
Everybody knows the image. High-powered speedboats racing across open water. Law enforcement in pursuit. Narcotics dumped overboard as the distance closes. It's the picture that came to define the Miami drug wars. But those scenes were only part of a much larger story. Throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, a steady flow of drugs moved toward the United States by sea, carried on vessels ranging from small, fast boats to larger fishing craft and freighters. The operation was constant, coordinated, and highly profitable. Smugglers relied on speed, timing, and knowledge of the coastline. Authorities responded with patrols, surveillance, and interdictions far from shore. What followed was an ongoing contest played out on open water, often out of public view. This film draws on reporting from the time to examine how that system functioned and how it was challenged at sea.
Turning north, he's turning north, he's turning north.
A customs plane on routine patrol spotting the 27-foot speedboat leaving Bimini, heading right toward South Florida. An hour and a half later, just south of the Boynton Beach Inlet, those on board spotted an approaching customs boat, and the chase was on.
Hey, watch out, guys, you circling in on each other.
At speeds of 60 miles an hour, the suspects dumping their load and trying to get away.
Bales in the water, bales in the water. He's throwing bales in the water.
The chase lasts 7 minutes before the suspects stop.
Hey, got him, got him, got him. Okay, we got him stopped, got him stopped.
3 suspects in custody, this boat seized, but $13.6 million of coke was floating in the Atlantic.
We didn't get any in the boat. They had cleaned the boat completely out. We picked all of the cocaine that we have in custody out of the water.
Customs agents say the $13.6 million of cocaine would have likely come in on a freighter and likely straight through the Miami River. But Operation River Walk is changing smugglers' trafficking patterns.
Since we've initiated Riverwalk, we've seen a tremendous decrease in smuggling activity.
A decrease on the Miami River since last February's crackdown by agents on the river.
We suspect that they've been stockpiling at this point and trying to figure out what their next move is. We think that this is probably one of the first ventures they're making in terms of testing us to see where else they might be able to smuggle these loads in.
Customs agents considering this incident a test. One, these smugglers failed.
We expected a phase where they're testing us now. They're probably holding back, realizing there's so much there at the river. It's almost like a gauntlet they're going to have to try and go through. And so now they're going to sort of probe and see where else they might be able to bring these things in. And we're ready for it.
As enforcement increased along the coastline, smuggling methods continued to evolve. One approach relied on what authorities described as motherships. Large vessels, often operating far from shore, would carry bulk shipments north from Colombia. At prearranged points at sea, the cargo was transferred, broken down, and moved onto smaller, faster boats. From there, the distribution network spread outward. Go-fast vessels delivered loads to secondary craft, sailboats, cabin cruisers, boats that could move with less attention along busy coastal waters. By the time the drugs reached marinas and inlets, they were often far removed from their point of origin. It was a system built on distance, coordination, and constant movement, designed to reduce risk at every stage.
Pot and cocaine. Heavily armed agents keep a close eye on hundreds of pounds worth once bound for our streets. Intercepted following a high-speed chase on the water.
This kind of reminds me of the Miami Vice days where you got fast boats, late night, wild chases.
A customs plane on patrol saw this go-fast boat meet with a second boat near Stiltsville. As agents moved in, the first boat took off, leading them on a zigzag chase through the bay.
That chase ended in Kennedy Park here in Coconut Grove when the two occupants, the driver and his passenger, jumped overboard and let the boat just run into the mangrove swamps.
Customs agents say their initial estimates are about 1,800 pounds of cocaine seized during the offshore bust, an estimated wholesale value of $1.6 million. This boat believed to be from Bimini. The drugs worth a couple $1,000s more these days, according to agents, due to a recent crackdown by customs. Last month, this Haitian freighter was seized on the Miami River, one of 9 Haitian freighters busted since February. A total of 6,000 pounds of cocaine seized. Customs agents say their success in keeping these drugs off the streets has been driving up the price.
What we're seeing because of the larger number of seizures that Customs has made recently is that the wholesale value of the cocaine is edging up. I think no matter what it's worth, they know there's a huge profit margin in it, and they will do whatever it takes to try to make illegal money.
The fruits of a 3.5-year investigation into the drug smuggling operation by the Broward County Sheriff's Department has yielded 36 arrests, the seizure of the drug operation's mothership, 4 smaller boats, and a huge quantity of marijuana.
We believe through intelligence that this freighter has made at least 30 trips to and from Colombia and offloading drugs.
There were other boats who also met some of the motherships. Besides this mothership, we have knowledge of some others also that have been involved in this operation.
Navarro says the raid on the operation began Friday and concluded last night, about 200 miles east of Miami. He says it appears the mothership would go to an assigned quadrant in the high seas. Smaller vessels would meet the larger freighter, take their load of contraband, and then transfer that load to sailboats and cabin cruisers while still at sea. Although authorities are calling the bust one of the largest in South Florida history, they say they still did not catch the ringleader or leaders of what they describe as a gigantic operation. All suspects now in custody are being held on temporary bonds ranging from $300,000 to $1 million. Broward authorities say they've been told one of the suspects was a police officer 2 years ago in an undisclosed Florida municipality. But they say they don't know which of the 36 arrested is that former officer. The Broward County Sheriff's Office says their investigation into this illegal drug smuggling operation is by no means over. The Sheriff's Office says this weekend's drug raid and seizure of goods is just a fraction of a national major distribution operation based in Fort Lauderdale. They say more arrests and indictments are expected.
Interdictions at sea were among the most dangerous parts of the effort to disrupt the trade. Law enforcement units worked by boat and by air, tracking suspect vessels across open water. When contact was made, the situation could change quickly. High speeds, limited visibility, uncertain conditions. In some cases, crews reported evasive maneuvers, attempts to flee, and the possibility of gunfire. Officers moved in regardless, identifying vessels and attempting to make seizures under difficult and often unpredictable circumstances. It was a hazardous assignment carried out with little margin for error.
They call themselves the good guys. They call the enemy bad guys and cocaine cowboys. But at the front lines in America's drug war, stopping suspects is no Hollywood Western.
If that boat decides to start shooting first, then we don't catch them by surprise, they catch us by surprise. So, to tell you the truth, first thing I do is pray.
More often, the suspects keep moving, and the Coast Guard fires first.
He says, please, stop.
Tell him to stop and I will stop.
All right. Getting hit. Got smoke. Got smoke. Woo! All right.
We are going to fire until they stop.
Stopping airplanes can be just as dangerous. Flying behind smugglers at 500 feet with no lights near crowded Miami International Airport is risky business. This time, the customs pilot made it through a chase. The smuggler didn't. But the government has been most successful stopping marijuana running at sea, where law enforcement life is not designed for luxury.
There's an old trick that veteran seamen play on the enlisted men showing up to sail for the first time. They tell them that the ship is about to pass a mail buoy. That sends the rookies downstairs looking for letters to friends and family. But of course, there is no mail buoy, and lack of communication with the folks back home is just one of the inconveniences on patrol.
Others include tedious chores, a plain menu, and no off-ship entertainment for weeks. But the people here volunteered to fight.
It's stopping drugs from getting over to where we are, to younger people that's younger than me, people that's going to high school, people that's going to elementary school, you know. It's getting that bad there.
Still, federal task force officials cite an impressive enforcement record. More than 3,300 arrests and 1,300 drug seizures since early last year. But while busts and seizures of most drugs are up, there is more cocaine in South Florida than ever before. On patrol with the Coast Guard, cruising at 200 miles an hour, 1,000 feet above the water, trying to spot drug smugglers.
It appears that everybody's lining up at Bahamian waters here for some sort of drop.
Roger, we got definite action up here. We have 5 go-fast type boats east of Bimini right now, about 10 miles east, and that's exactly the info we had on the airdrop, so I don't think there's much doubt there's something going to happen here.
But somebody spotted the law, our jet or the customs helicopter nearby.
We saw them all come out, appear to be going in one direction. They saw us and seemed to go back in or somewhat scatter.
All but one of the boats roared to safety in Bimini Harbor, where American authorities have no jurisdiction. The other boat was chased by a Coast Guard helicopter until it was finally stopped by agents a quarter of a mile from Miami Beach. But no drugs.
This is the Coast Guard cutter Reliance. It's one of 5 now on patrol in the Caribbean for the Vice President's task force. The cutters locate smugglers 3 ways.
They get reconnaissance reports from planes, intelligence from agents on land, and they spot ships on radar. The Reliance is on patrol near the Windward Passage between Cuba and Haiti, a favored route for smugglers.
Motor vessel Clarencetown. Clarencetown. This is Coast Guard 615. Do you have a radio?
The Clarencetown had a radio, but no drugs. 3 days later, an American boat on its way to re-register in Jamaica. But again, no drugs. Then an overnight chase before the Concorde 1 on its way from Colombia to the Bahamas was stopped at dawn.
Brian, boarding party. The whole vessel's covered in diesel fuel, including the front 2 holes and the after holes.
Marijuana's smell can be masked by diesel fuel. But if there was any on this boat, it was thrown off during the night.
The one we saw today was heading north with no cargo whatsoever. He was going to go all the way to Freeport to see if they had any cargo up there for him. In today's age, it's just not economically reasonable to do something like that. So that would be there was something wrong there, although we didn't find anything.
But despite some bad days, the Federal Drug Task Force has an impressive record of stopping marijuana smugglers at sea. 2.9 million pounds has been seized since the task force was formed last year. The price of marijuana is up on the street, an indication that supply is down. But that hasn't put many drug dealers out of business.
A lot of them have changed their smuggling habits. Some of them were smuggling marijuana, now they're smuggling cocaine. Is less detectable, is more profitable, and there is a big market for it right now.
There's so much cocaine on the street that the price has dropped to half of what it was a year ago. You might think that would cause morale on the front lines to drop, but it hasn't.
We want to get the most busts. We want to have more busts than anybody else.
Robin, within the hour, the cocaine-laden aircraft arrived here at the Opa-locka airport. We have some videotape for you now of its landing. The aircraft left the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba around 10 o'clock this morning. 2 American passengers are on board with the coke. We have not been told who they are or where they're from. The cocaine aboard the aircraft is, as you said, the largest maritime seizure in history, the 3rd largest overall. Officers say they have yet to get the full value and weight, but it is about 2,200 pounds. It was hidden in several compartments aboard the 32-foot sloop. And part of the Coast Guard officers, or at least one of them who was on board the Coast Guard cutter when those arrests were made, was Officer Peter Bergeron. If you could come this way and tell us exactly what tipped you to this.
Well, the vessel, when we approached it on the high seas, we noticed that the name Chinook on the stern was hand-painted, which tipped it off, and plus it was flying storm sails, and it was a nice clear day, so we couldn't figure out why they were flying storm sails, and the rigging was a little bit of erratic.
I understand, and I'm very sorry we have to cut you off. We are short of time.
Okay.
We'll have more details for you at 6 on News 4. I'm Pam Salisbury reporting live from the Opa-locka Airport.
We saw the vessel, and he was headed north, and he had a steel hull and just a general profile vessel, so we were going to go on and board it. The cocaine was distributed evenly about the ship in secret compartments. When we got it to the naval base in Guantanamo Bay, we had to fairly take apart the vessel in order to get all the cocaine off it.
I'm trusting you, Bob, so do your best job. I hope you were Y-balanced.
Oh, okay. How much is on the pound? 394.6.
By the early 1980s, drug trafficking through South Florida had become a national concern. In Washington, Vice President George H.W. Bush was tasked with coordinating a federal response under President Ronald Reagan. The focus turned increasingly to interdiction at sea. Along the coast and across the Caribbean, the Coast Guard expanded patrols using a mix of aging cutters and smaller boats, many built decades earlier, now operating at the center of a growing enforcement effort. From the air, surveillance widened the search. Aircraft scanned open water for vessels moving north, while helicopters tracked targets closer to shore and guided interceptions. Together, these forces formed a layered system, one still taking shape as traffickers adapted and authorities worked to keep pace.
The Reagan budget would reduce personnel nationwide by 3,400, decommission 11 cutters, and close 15 search and rescue operations along with 3 air stations. All of this proposed at a time when we desperately need more Coast Guard action to curtail the almost unlimited smuggling of cocaine and marijuana onto our shores. On one hand, Congress is considering an overall depletion of Coast Guard activities. On the other hand, Congress is trying to win a war on drugs against almost hopeless odds.
Vice President George Bush took the official tour of the Coast Guard cutter Courageous this morning and saw firsthand how the vessel operates in drug interdiction cases. After a brief statement to the ship's crew, Bush was led over to the 68-foot fishing boat Miss Gladys, seized by the Courageous Saturday with 15 tons of marijuana aboard. Earlier today, the Vice President was briefed by officials of the Coast Guard, Drug Enforcement Agency, Customs, and by the new director of the Cabinet-level Task Force on South Florida Crime.
Our focus is going to be on trying to deal with those two causal factors for crime in South Florida, drugs and illegal aliens. And we hope that in the course of that we're going to be able to make a dent in the general concern for and serious problem of violent crime in South Florida.
The Vice President ended his tour at the base by calling the Coast Guard's efforts highly successful, and he said the Coast Guard is on the cutting edge of the work of the task force. President Reagan's introduction to the nuts and bolts of the South Florida Task Force came aboard the Coast Guard cutter Dauntless. The 210-foot cutter is one of the most visible in the fleet and was appropriately scrubbed and painted for the occasion. The President, accompanied by numerous aides and Coast Guard brass, was given a bird's-eye look at the cutter and her operation in the 7th District. And Mr. Reagan was duly impressed when told the Dauntless has netted almost 70,000 pounds of marijuana in 3 seizures since the task force was created. After the tour, the President praised the cutter and her crew. He mentioned the 2 new ships commissioned in Key West today as an important new addition to the task force. The President then awarded the Dauntless with a Coast Guard commendation, and Mr. Reagan got an official Dauntless cap in return.
Thank you very much.
As the scale of trafficking grew, enforcement became increasingly coordinated. Federal agencies, including the Drug Enforcement Administration, U.S. Customs, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, began working more closely together. The goal was to close gaps between jurisdictions and disrupt smuggling networks operating across land, air, and sea. Information sharing increased. Operations became joint efforts, and enforcement began to function as a single coordinated response to a rapidly expanding trade.
It's been a 2-year-long investigation that law enforcement refers to as Operation White Sea. An extraordinary effort to keep millions of dollars worth of illegal drugs and money from making it into the wrong hands.
The United States Attorney is pleased to announce the unsealing of a federal indictment charging a total of 10 defendants with conspiracy to import cocaine and marijuana and conspiracy to possess with the intent to distribute cocaine and marijuana.
Officials say each played a different role. The leader sets up shop in Canada. Some provide the go-fast boats for the importation of cocaine from Jamaica through the Bahamas and into the United States.
I'll put it down in street terms. And in street terms, what you're looking at is potentially 68 million dosages of cocaine at about a 50% purity that would generate $680 million. So that is $680 million that is not finding its way into the pockets of organized crime.
The Drug Enforcement Administration says that these men are participants in 14 of the largest drug smuggling rings anywhere in the country, and they came into federal court today busload after busload. Their arrests were the culmination of a 2.5-year sting operation that cost the government more than $750,000 and involved 400 undercover meetings. The DEA credits the success of the operation to the help of the U.S. Coast Guard and 20 other federal, state, and local agencies. More than $1 billion worth of narcotics were seized, 155 indictments were issued, roughly 120 of those defendants have been arrested, and federal authorities say their operations spanned the nation.
This is a tremendously important, coordinated, 2-year investigative action to rid South Florida as a stronghold harboring 70% of the nation's cocaine, marijuana, and methaqualone smuggling organizations.
Operation Tiburon was a 14-month joint operation involving the Justice Department, the Coast Guard, South Florida Police, and for the first time, Colombia, the principal supplier of marijuana to the United States.
Significantly, most of the marijuana seized by the Colombians, 4,631,417 pounds, was confiscated on Colombia's Guajira Peninsula before it was smuggled out of the country.
At one point, the origin of the drugs was in France. Then it shifted to Mexico. Now we are the unlucky ones. Let's hope that in the future Colombia will not be the place. And the government is certainly undertaking all possible efforts with the cooperation of the U.S. health and authorities.
Through the efforts of the FBI and using the highly sophisticated AWACS aircraft, officials were able to detect smugglers, finally arresting 495 people and seizing almost 100 vessels, most of those in South Florida.
We have already decided to add 20 DEA agents and 40 FBI agents to offices in South Florida.
Coast Guard and Justice Department officials say the successful conclusion of Operation Tiburon will mean fewer drugs coming into South Florida. But they also say that the smugglers, always one step ahead of the law, are now simply moving their operations up the coast.
By 1984, federal law enforcement had expanded its reach against organized drug trafficking. New legislation strengthened the concept of the continuing criminal enterprise, allowing authorities to treat smuggling operations as ongoing networks rather than isolated crimes. Vessels, aircraft, and financial assets connected to trafficking could now be seized under federal law. For smuggling networks operating through the Caribbean and into South Florida, the structure of risk had changed. It was no longer just individual shipments under threat, but the entire system behind them.
Arrests began early today, what's been codenamed Operation Kingfish.
Of the 16 people named in the indictments, 11 live in Dade and Broward counties. They're accused of participating in a ring that over a 5-year period smuggled an estimated £250,000 pounds of marijuana. They reportedly operated in small boats off Bimini and other islands in the Bahamas. And after unloading pot from motherships, they either stored it in the islands or raced to the coast of South Florida to make the deliveries. Police say this man, Nicholas Como of Fort Lauderdale, was their leader. The case is unusual because for the first time in the history of the Vice President's task force, they have an indictment charging a reputed drug leader under a tough continuing crime law. It carries a mandatory 10-year sentence.
This is the first time the task group has been able to indict such charges in this area. The task group primary responsibility is over the last 2 years has been mainly the interdiction effort. But now that we are a permanent unit in South Florida here, we are now able to concentrate more into the long-term investigations.
Today's indictment came after an 18-month probe by members of the Drug Task Force. Its leaders say that that unit is now better organized, and in the coming months we can expect to see more indictments against whole drug organizations rather than just individual smugglers.
Even as enforcement expanded, its effectiveness still depended on integrity within the system. In South Florida, allegations of corruption periodically surfaced within agencies operating at major ports, including Miami and Port Everglades. When oversight failed, contraband could move through established checkpoints with less resistance, complicating efforts to disrupt trafficking networks both at sea and on shore.
Federal officials were disturbed to discover that some of their own were dealing drugs.
This case has been unusual in that it was a network of employees, higher grade level supervisory employees, which we feel had the potential to be particularly damaging to the agency if allowed to continue.
The drugs were allegedly smuggled from 1983 through 1985, include marijuana and cocaine. These are some of the people that were arrested this morning. The three customs officials, Francis Kinney, he was the head of the New Orleans office. Charles Jordan was the head of the Key Largo office, which happens to have the largest seizures in the United States. And William Wallace was the air ring supervisor here in Homestead.
Customs agents have long suspected an internal conspiracy inside the Port of Miami. After all, getting drugs into or out of the port would require the help of insiders to get illegal narcotics past federal agents.
In all, a total of 22 defendants have been charged today, including 13 former and current ILA longshoremen.
Agents say these two men still missing are the ringleaders of this massive organization and the direct link to the Colombians, responsible for smuggling 20,000 kilos of cocaine through the port. In containers just like these, customs agents say what the smugglers would do is they would open them up, pull the bags of drugs off, drive them to a clandestine area, put the drugs in the car, and off they go.
The problem we have in these internal conspiracies, the international longshoremen control the movement of cargo here at the port. When a ship came in loaded with cargo, they would know which container had the cocaine. Their people in this organization would move the cocaine, the container with it, to an area in the port where it couldn't be seen by customs. They'd quickly break into the back of it, rip the cocaine out of the container, close the container back up, seal it, and send it on its way. The person who actually owned the container and was getting legitimate merchandise had no idea that his container was being used to smuggle all this cocaine.
The three defendants agreed to unload what they believed to be real cocaine from the RCCL cruise ship Sovereign of the Seas. In fact, what was going on, there was an undercover sting operation, and it was sham cocaine that the defendants thought they were unloading.
Customs inspectors pried up the plywood and uncovered more than $1 million in drugs. Marijuana tightly packed in 411 bricks, some of them smeared with Jamaican mustard.
Obviously, someone thought that by smearing some of the packages with mustard, it would detract the dogs from detecting the marijuana.
The mustard didn't work because customs inspectors were already suspicious about this container. It arrived empty on a ship from Jamaica and unloaded in the dead of night.
In darkness at 2:50 in the morning. Shadowy conditions, probably.
And yet, despite those conditions, an inspector noticed the uneven floor of this container and ordered an X-ray, making the second major ship seizure at Port Everglades in just a week. And that is raising concerns about security here and the possibility of smugglers working as shipyard workers.
We're looking very closely at the possibility of an internal conspiracy here. This, again, is an indication this wasn't probably going anywhere but right here.
What makes this conduct charged, in this case, so egregious is that the defendants had a stranglehold on the port.
Federal agents say the leadership of the Teamsters Local used insider knowledge of the ship movements at the port to import 3,500 kilos of cocaine and 39,000 kilos of marijuana. Charged are Clarence Lark, the past president of Local 390, and his brother-in-law, Larry Crenshaw, who, according to the indictment, have been smuggling drugs here since 1985. With money from the drugs, investigators say Lark financed a company that rented trucks to movie and TV production companies. In making the movie Striptease with Demi Moore, investigators say Teamsters Union members were forced to pay kickbacks to Lark and Crenshaw in order to work on the film. The Channel 10 investigators were there 2 years ago when members of the Longshoremen's Union and security guards at the port were busted for smuggling cocaine in an operation that is now being said to be linked to the union leaders. Security at the port is part of the problem. How open are things here? Well, as you can see, anyone can drive anything right onto the port, and without being asked for ID at all, you can drive right up to the side of a ship. Tighter security, nationwide criminal background checks for workers, these are some of the improvements still needed at the port, where investigators say their job is not done.
The stakes are too high a price to pay when it comes to security. The resounding law enforcement message in the seaports in South Florida is that they're not for sale.
U.S. Customs inspectors are ripping up the floor, although they already know what they'll find underneath it. They knew it when they watched as the container was offloaded from a freighter this morning and recognized the all-too-familiar fake bottom.
You've got 4 inches here. Right. That's a standard container. Over there you have, what, half an inch? Oh.
This load of marijuana will turn out to be over 1,600 pounds, along with 2 pounds of cocaine, more than $1 million had it made it to the streets. It's becoming a familiar pattern. Last October, 2 other shipments came in the same way. Empty containers, false floors, mustard sprayed over the packages, presumably in a futile effort to trick drug-sniffing dogs. In the past 3 months, dogs and inspectors have been busy at Port Everglades. 8 shipments of marijuana in all, 4 of cocaine. There is a federal investigation underway. Agents tell me they believe that there are far too many similarities with these empty cargo containers coming into Port Everglades for it just to be a coincidence. They do believe they are linked. They do believe they will be making arrests.
Alongside containerized freight, smugglers adapted their methods, concealing narcotics within the structure of vessels themselves, or blending them into legitimate commercial cargo. Drugs were hidden inside ship hulls, fuel tanks, and sealed compartments designed to avoid inspection. In other cases, contraband was interwoven with lawful goods, moving through ports alongside ordinary trade. As enforcement methods evolved, so too did concealment, turning nearly every surface of maritime transport into a potential hiding place.
You still have coke back to here, and it's stacked all the way from top to bottom.
90 kilos of cocaine, all tightly packed into the ship's keel. The 70-foot freighter pulled out of the water by federal agents, strongly suspecting this ship was smuggling drugs.
It's very sophisticated. mean, we see in the welding compartments that they put on these vessels that they're very sophisticated, very difficult to access.
Customs agents cut into the keel with blow torches, eventually reaching in and bringing out packet after packet of cocaine. Just the latest in a series of successful seizures along the Miami River, which have turned up more than 3,000 pounds of cocaine, all of it hidden in the keels and hulls of ships arriving from Haiti.
All of their cover stories are basically is that they're coming up here empty. They dock and they wait 2-3 weeks to bring on board just very invaluable merchandise, used mattresses, used bicycles, beat up cars, and then certain foodstuffs, beans, rice, and things like that to bring back to Haiti. So the dollars and cents just don't add up for what they can make on that.
Hidden in secret compartments in the hull of the vessel, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of cocaine. A sophisticated drug smuggling operation, the cocaine stored in the keel of the ship, located right between the propellers, deep under the waterline.
This is a unique place in which to store cocaine. It's extremely difficult for our personnel to find it.
U.S. Customs Service, the FBI, and DEA acting on a tip last week and seizing 9 vessels.
We're here today to announce the seizure of about 2,015 pounds of cocaine that was found on 4 of 9 ships that were searched on the Miami River.
The first ship, the Hardness, inside 2 secret compartments, 104 pounds of cocaine. The second ship, the Caribbean Seahorse, 524 pounds of cocaine. Ship number 3, Rio Star, 846 pounds. And finally, the Croyans, 541 pounds of cocaine. All the vessels registered in Honduras, however, coming to South Florida from Haiti.
During the last 3 years, Haiti has been one of the largest transshipment points of illegal drugs in the Caribbean.
These crates are supposed to contain Italian glassware and marble, but customs officials are taking them apart because in between the glass and the marble, there may be a shipment of narcotics. Foreign shipments like this enter the U.S. through the port of Miami every day, and often those shipments also include drugs, primarily marijuana. Customs officials here say drug seizures from containerized freight shipments have increased 20 to 30% in the past year, and because of that, inspections here are being stepped up. Officials say in the past it's been easy for smugglers to bring drugs in this way because foreign cargo usually isn't inspected until it reaches its final destination, which could be anywhere in the U.S.
It could be that the cargo is diverted along the way. It could be removed by any number of handlers all along the way. And our point here is to check more at the origin to determine the extent of this, and maybe even larger than we think.
Customs officials will be inspecting the containers on a selective basis. They have been able to identify certain countries, shipping lines, and importers who are most likely to be involved with smuggling, and they will use that information to determine what containers to open up.
If narcotics are seized, the case is turned over to the Drug Enforcement Administration, and charges can be brought against any number of people involved, from the foreign shipper to the carrier which takes the cargo to its final destination.
Customs agents drilling for drugs. This is the 10th time since February that a freighter from Haiti is caught carrying illegal cargo. This time, an estimated 160 pounds of cocaine, worth $1.4 million, was found inside metal containers in the fuel tanks. Customs officials say they're seeing an explosion of drug running from Haiti.
The smuggling organizations determined that Haiti was a good transit point. They've taken advantage of it and used this commodity or this mechanism to get the drugs in. And I think now it's good law enforcement that's stopping it.
Officials say their interdiction efforts are having very real results. Miami-Dade police says the clampdown on cocaine shipments has increased the street price from between $14,000 to $17,000 a kilo just 3 months ago to between $20,000 to $25,000 today.
They've been building up now modus operandi. They're getting an idea of what to look for and stuff, and they're just doing a heck of a great job.
680 pounds of pure cocaine with a street value in excess of $170 million is now in the custody of the Vice President's Crime Task Force. The evidence room reeked of diesel fumes. The cocaine in kilo packages was found inside the fuel tanks aboard this freighter, Mar Azul. PVC tubes protected the contraband.
It is a very large seizure of cocaine. It is the largest seizure that has been made here in Miami since the first seizure, 3,700 pounds in early March, shortly after the task force arrived. It's the largest seizure since then, and by any standard, it is a significant seizure of cocaine.
Drug agents had been watching the Colombian freighter since Thursday when it came into dock on the Miami River. Agents closed in early this morning as crew members left the vessel with a small quantity of the drug. A full-scale search of the freighter netted the rest of the cocaine. 12 crew members, including the captain, were arrested and charged with cocaine smuggling.